Welcome, everyone, to Matter and aMoon's Startup Showcase. I'm Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. Matter is a healthcare technology incubator and an innovation hub built on a belief that collaboration between entrepreneurs and industry leaders is the best way to develop healthcare solutions. Today's program is a collaboration with aMoon, which is a global health tech and life sciences investment firm based in Israel with more than $1 billion under management. We've been building a relationship with aMoon over the last several years, and I'm thrilled to showcase 3 of their portfolio companies today. We have 4 individuals here who will ask the company's questions following their presentations. First is Tom Langan, who's the CEO of Veradigm, Allscripts payer and life sciences arm. Thanks for joining us, Tom. Tom has extensive life sciences payer data analytics experience, having held executive positions at Symphony, Medimedica, where he managed their life sciences data analytics and consulting business. Omar Perez is the global growth and strategic alliances lead at Cedars-Sinai. He works closely with startups and builds Cedars-Sinai's accelerators relationships with key healthcare innovation partners. Laura Gladfelter is part of the technology innovation team at HCSC, which operates Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans in Illinois, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Montana. Prior to joining HCSC, Laura worked in corporate strategy and marketing in the e-commerce space. And then Kaveri Armenta is a performance improvement specialist at OSF Healthcare. She sources and vets solutions that have the potential to improve operations or care at OSF, which is based in Peoria, Illinois. So each company will have 7 minutes to present their solution, followed by 7 minutes of Q&A with the panelists. So before we hear from the companies, it is my pleasure to introduce Yaron Danley. Yaron is a partner at aMoon and the head of aMoon Alpha, which I'm sure he'll share a little bit more about. Before joining aMoon, Yaron served as CEO of multiple biotechnology companies and also ran the technology transfer company associated with Hebrew University. Yaron, it's been great getting to know you, getting to know aMoon over the years, and looking forward to this program. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. So I'm super excited to kick off our relationship with Matter with this short glimpse into the amazing innovation that we at aMoon are witnessing and have been very privileged at supporting over the last few years. Just one minute of intro for those who are less familiar with our team. aMoon is a purpose-built platform to invest in the convergence of healthcare and technology. We are about a little over $1 billion venture fund. We operate 2 venture investment vehicles. One is called aMoon Velocity, an early stage fund, and one is called aMoon Growth, mid to late stage fund. We're a large multidisciplinary team of very committed members and colleagues working predominantly out of our headquarters in Israel, but also in our Boston office, a new US office, which we opened a few months ago. We've invested so far in a little over 30 companies, actually, 31 to be precise. And these are the select innovators we're able to support from a pipeline of about 1,800 global investment opportunities we review every year. Our fund is really focused on partnerships with investors in our fund, which come from all over the globe and represent very different kinds of investors, high net worth family offices, strategics, etc. Partnerships with ecosystem players like Matter, and partnerships, most importantly, with innovators, 3 of which you're gonna hopefully be excited as much as I am to hear today. So I welcome you, and I hope you enjoyed this session. And with that, I'll hand it over to Casey to lead the discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. We will jump right into the pitches. So first we have Daniel Blumenthal of MDClone. Daniel, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thanks so much, Casey, and thanks, Stephen, and the entire Matter community and your own. I have to say it's particularly exciting to be on a Matter program. I'm in Chicago for MDClone. MDClone, although is an Israeli company founded in Israel, I joined the company in its early days to launch its operations outside of Israel and start to build the business. I happen to be in Chicago and remember going back to the days when Matter was merely a blueprint in Stephen's backpack. So it's really exciting to be here and see this community. So MDClone exists really to recognize that we have valuable insights embedded into the massive amounts of healthcare data that we've collected over the years. And yet recognizing that there remains a huge disconnect between that data and those users who can use it to actually impact people's health. And I'm sure this is an experience felt by many of the people listening today. It's something that I've seen both in time as a researcher, but in time working with startup companies, technology companies. You have an idea, you have maybe a technology, something that's been developed, but how do you prove it? How do you demonstrate its value? How do you demonstrate it's valid and valuable inside a healthcare operation? And you need real data to do that. You need real evidence collected at the source system inside healthcare systems ultimately. Even if you could get approval to get that data, even if you get that thumbs up, it's going to require some expert with advanced programming skills inside the organization to go extract the data, to curate it, clean it, to model it for me to be able to access it, and then some iterative process likely to make sure that all the data elements that I need are there. This can easily take months and months and months if it ever happens. And what we see as our vision is the need to remove those mediators, to enable that end user who has the question, has the idea, who has developed something, to go straight to the data and explore independently, rapidly, and safely. And we've achieved this through our Atoms platform that's now installed all over the world. It's typically installed inside individual health systems, though it could be at any source of essentially original PHI. And the idea of MDClone is to sort of flip the order here. We want to be able to extract the data first, as much data as possible, and organize it in such a way that allows an end user, someone without advanced programming skills, can interact with it. These could be clinicians or researchers or even administrators, interact with the data, ask and answer questions dynamically, and ultimately even have a really unique model for collaboration that I'll speak about in a bit. So I want to share just a few moments, to share a bit about the underlying technology behind the Atoms, the platform itself. So the first sort of unique aspect of the platform is the way we organize data. We start, as I mentioned, by trying to extract as much data as possible on the front end. And we actually take that data from any source. Anything that happens to a patient, we're built to be able to ingest. And we ingest it onto timelines for individual patients. The idea is when you ingest it and store it on timelines for individual patients, you're organizing the data actually the way medicine happens. And in doing so, it allows end users to interact with it and really understand behaviors and treatments in the right context. That's the way medicine happens over time. And we're able to ingest really any type of data, any source, EHR agnostic and beyond. We're talking clinical data elements at the source system, granular labs, medications, procedures, diagnosis. Could be financial data, claims data, cost data, if it exists. Could be genomic data, could be patient-reported outcomes, could be your SAT scores when you're 16. If the system has the data, we can ingest it, we can place it on individual patient timelines and allow an end user in an intuitive way to ask and answer questions. On top of that way we organize data, we also have a semantic engine which allows end users to interact with data in familiar terminologies, and an NLP solution which allows us to extract structured data from unstructured data elements, notes, and reports, which in many specialties is actually where perhaps a majority of the data actually resides. So once we've organized the data, and once we've made the self-service platform available for dynamic exploration by sort of novice end users even, we're still left with a huge challenge of protecting patient privacy. Because the reality is that most users, and if we think broadly, we're talking 99% of users out there are actually blocked out of the game. They're not allowed to see the original data. And so MDClone, we've introduced really an end-to-end privacy solution that starts with the way we ingest data all the way into the way we actually expose the data to any end user. And this end-to-end privacy solution allows us to show original data to users who are allowed to see it for certain contexts, but also to create what we call synthetic data and share that much more broadly. And the synthetic data is really a new approach to de-identification. And it goes way beyond de-identification in that it can create data sets that look like real data, they act like real data. Any conclusion you would yield in an original data set, you'd yield the same conclusion with the synthetic data, and yet the synthetic data doesn't actually contain any real patients. And in doing so, it allows organizations who hold PHI to ultimately share data in ways that were just never before possible. So within a healthcare organization, ultimately, this really impacts the entire organization and its use of data. Whether you're on the research side of the house, and to enable a researcher to wake up in the morning at 8 o'clock and have a hypothesis in mind and go straight to the data, no IRB, being able to interrogate rich granular data immediately. Or whether in the operator side of the house, performance improvement, quality improvement, population health, being able to better understand care pathways, care variation, be able to build risk prediction models, and actually take the insights. And because we're at the source system, because we actually have the original data, we can actually act on those insights in the care delivery process. And then finally, thinking about how this impacts innovation, whether internally inside an organization or with third parties, building new tools, building new services. And it's really with that in mind that we turn to what is perhaps something that's most exciting for me, I think, and many of us in MDClone, which is our opportunity through the global network, which both allows our health systems individually and members who have an ADAMS installation individually to collaborate with each other, sharing best practices, building larger data sets, benchmarking against each other, but then introducing a brand new model for data collaboration. Instead of data sharing as it usually happens today, where someone goes in, builds a static file, spends those months and months that I spoke of earlier to build a static file and ship it off to someone. We introduce a concept of invite in, where we have a system installed at the source with rich data. Can we hand a username and password to an end user, to a tech company, to a startup company, to a researcher, to a student, to a pharma company, to a payer, and invite them into our organization with protections in place, with patient security in mind, but enable dynamic exploration at the source and potentially collaborate with users, with researchers, with clinicians at those member sites to be able to not only find the insights, but potentially take action and impact patient care. So with that story, we've expanded quite rapidly across the globe. We're founded in Israel back in 2016. Today, we have really the entire country of Israel covered with several installations around the country. If you're a citizen of Israel, your data is inside one of our MDClone implementations. And since then, we've expanded into North America, both in Canada and the US, with large health systems, on the research with academic community, and with the federal government space in several directions. So I hope that whet your appetite a bit, thinking about ways to leverage data and build new types of collaboration as we look to solve and improve patient health, and certainly look forward to our discussion here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. And with that, I'll ask our 4 panelists to please join us on camera and unmute yourself and go ahead, and you have 7 minutes of Q&A with Daniel.
Hey, Daniel, it's Tom Langan. Nice to meet you. Could you talk about the real-world examples of where you're using the insights and then taking action and showing potentially quality improvement, or just maybe some more perspective on the synthetic data and the insights that are actually real-world action?
Sure. So I'll turn to actually a good example from one of our sites, Intermountain. We started a project with Intermountain. Intermountain came to us and basically had this concept of building out their own kidney care practice. And their idea is we can hire physicians into our organization. we can identify, we can then use those physicians to take care of patients, but how do we identify the patients that we need to bring into our clinic? And their existing data systems, it takes forever to identify those patients. And essentially what they end up doing is calling in patients alphabetically. So they're using MDClone first to identify who even has kidney disease. It's not something that is necessarily so well documented or stored inside their EHR. And beyond just who has kidney disease, what stage are they in? What's the stage of CKD? Definitely not something that's recorded in the healthcare record. And so they're using MDClone first to establish who has kidney disease, then to build a prediction model for who is going to have the worst outcomes. And in Intermountain's case, being a payer for being under risk for about half their population, the cost of that is really an important factor as well. So being able to predict who's going to have worse outcomes and highest cost, and be able to bring those patients in based on a risk score, being able to build that model potentially with synthetic data, actually with outside people, apply that model on the real population, click a button, and actually populate a list of real patients that need to be called by a care coordinator and brought into a clinic. So that's sort of the full suite, going from how do we organize that data, how do we build knowledge on that data that's useful, how do we build an interesting model, potentially with synthetic data, and then apply that onto real data to take care of patients.
Awesome, great, thanks, Daniel.
Hey, Daniel, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the implementation model, like what's the timeline to set up, what's pricing, users, etc.
Sure. So the idea here is that we're shifting this process of asking for data instead of once someone requests the data and then someone goes and pulls it for each individual project, we're shifting that to the front end. So a typical installation, we can be live 3 to 4 months, usually with some amount of data in a health system. It is potentially a never-ending cycle. There's more data always coming in. And our idea is we've set up a model that allows us to ingest any type of data in the future. So it's a structureless model such that, yeah, in 3 to 4 months, we can be live. But if in another 2 months, someone comes to us with Fitbit data that we never saw before, we know where to put it. So that's a typical installation. Once we're live with MDClone, and there is substantial data to allow users, the user training for some users is days or less even. And then we typically look across the healthcare organization to see, usually looking for key initiatives to start something like CKD, often into the academic space where there's really eager users and tech savvy users who are ready to go. And I think finally into the sort of collaboration third-party space, thinking about how can we work with external players to invite them into our system and work on new projects. And I guess the other question was on the costing side. It's a license and services model, primarily installation fees, sort of generally one time, and then ongoing support over time, and primarily a license model, both for the health system itself to use, and then we have for the third-party collaboration as well a license model that allows users to come in and use MDClone, and then data access fees that get paid to the health system itself or whoever the data originates.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Daniel, this is Kaveri. It seems like there's a lot of patient data that's being shared and collected. So my question would be, how does your insurance policy kind of sustain that? And then also in terms of any potential risk for breaches, can you tell us a little bit about that? Sure.
So I'll clarify, I think it's an excellent question. I'll clarify that the data in our typical installation, the data sits behind the firewall of the healthcare organization itself. So MDClone doesn't in a typical installation take on the data. And so we're operating underneath your systems. It is transferring data merely into a new data lake at your site. The actual liabilities for the data, therefore, are really quite minimal beyond what you already have.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel. Omar here from Cedars-Sinai. I just had some basic questions just about the size of your company in terms of like how many employees you have. And I know, I think you said it was originally based out of Israel, but are you also in the States?
Yeah, so we are now, it's amazing to see our growth. We're now over 100 people. We're still primarily based in Israel. It's where we're founded and our headquarters is. Our R&D is still in Israel. We're about 70 or so people. We're about 30 or so people now in North America, really spread all over, both in Canada and the US, where our commercial business is focused. And that's now 6 years in, with 25 plus customers, again, both on the health system side, some on the payer side, and some on the life science side that are really some of the newer additions to the portfolio.
That's great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Exciting journey, for sure.
Yeah.
Other questions, or have we hit our time, Casey?
Yeah, we're at about 7 minutes, but if we have one more question, we can take it.
So Daniel, it's Tom. Just so as far as the growth opportunities, continue to expand the core business in the States and outside the States, right? So started in Israel, but expanding rapidly in the States and other countries as well. Is that kind of because there's two sides of your platform, right? It's the health systems, other data sources where you're installing the platform, but there's also an ecosystem of whether it's researchers, healthcare IT, startups, mature companies, right? So can you just talk for a second about kind of your strategy and your vision to how to continue to transform the platform?
Absolutely. So the growth is definitely into the health system space initially, and that's been the focus for the first many years. And the idea there is there's impact within each individual healthcare organization where we sit, and that's the operational performance quality inside the health system, workflows of the health system. It's been within the last year or so that we've really started to expand that community of and enabling third parties to participate and collaborate. And that's once we had a sort of large enough pool of health systems in which we could invite those users into. We're nearing a pretty substantial data asset in terms of our individual sites. If you count, we're now over 50 million patients that are in some MDClone installation, and it's rich data. We're talking at the source, not only not just aggregated sort of claims data, but rich clinical data and potentially other sources. So we're starting to build out, and it's never perhaps enough, but it's really enough to be a really representative sample of some of these countries, certainly of Israel, now getting closer into the US and Canada. And we're certainly looking at the European market and beyond to add more to enable that sort of collaboration and that third party opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks again, everyone.
Wonderful. Great job, Daniel. And with that, we will start on our next pitch. So we have Joseph Mossel, the co-founder and CEO of Ibex Medical Analytics. Joseph, whenever you're ready.
Ready, Casey? Just you can see my deck. So, hi, I'm Joseph Mossel, CEO and co-founder of Ibex, speaking today from our Boston offices. And just before I start off, thank you to Matter and aMoon for having me on and giving this opportunity to tell us about what we're doing here at Ibex. And I always like to start from an example. For years, I've been showing a similar slide, and it excites me every time. What we're looking here are what's known as the whole slide image. This is a scan of a biopsy. And all of these biopsies actually went through clinical labs. And what's common to all of these, that they were misdiagnosed severely. So these are, if there's any pathologists in the crowd, you would immediately see that these are all contain cancer. All of these were misdiagnosed as benign cases. So each of these is a potential patient with a missed diagnosis of cancer. Luckily for all of these patients, they were diagnosed at labs which have deployed the Ibex platform, we call it Galen, and the platform was able to correctly diagnose these cases and allowed to revise the cases. So we've had already hundreds, this is an example, we've had hundreds of cases of patients where we corrected the diagnosis in Israel and Europe and in the US. Just kind of a bit about the company. It was founded by me and my co-founder, Dr. Chaim Linhart. We've raised $52 million in funding to date. We're 60 employees. Most of the team doing product development is out of Israel. We also have offices here in Boston, where I'm located, and in Europe. Some of the things which really set us apart, we have access to a massive data set through our partner in Israel, Maccabi Healthcare Services. We're the only platform which already have commercially deployed solution for multiple breast cancers. We have regulatory clearances in the EU, and last year achieved FDA breakthrough device designation and working on our FDA clearance. We've had very, very good results in every clinical trial that we've done and multiple publications. So we're working very hard to create the body of evidence needed to create the credibility. And we're the only company in our domain which already has deployments of this kind of technology around the world. So I think you already have some idea of that what we're doing might be important. But just to make it even sharper relief, so beyond the challenge of diagnostic accuracy, labs worldwide are also struggling with handling the workload. So there's less and less pathologists, more and more cases, growing complexity, and there's this growing gap between the capacity of the labs to deal with what's coming their way and the actual workload. And we're here to help bridge that gap and do both in terms of accuracy, but also in terms of handling the workload which labs need to handle. So our mission is to make sure every patient gets accurate diagnosis, that they get it quickly, and that we allow them to get the right treatment. And I'll talk a bit more about this personalized elements at the end of my talk. So how do we do it? We have data for multiple sources from a partner in Israel, but also other pathology institutes worldwide. We work with an international team of pathologists, some of them world experts, to annotate these slides, to mark the different types of regions. And then we use different technologies, deep learning, machine learning, computer vision, and other data science techniques to develop our algorithms. What these algorithms allow is automation of the diagnostic task, not in the sense that we replace the pathologist, but we automate some of the steps that the pathologist needs to do, helping them do their job faster and more accurately. By that, we increase the overall accuracy of the labs. And one of the things pathologists really, really like about our product when they use it is that it's not a black box. The algorithm, they say, it thinks like a pathologist. It explains to them how would it diagnose every single region. So the pathologist doesn't necessarily always have to agree with the algorithm, but they always understand what is the algorithm thinking in quotes. In terms of the data, which I mentioned, so we have a unique and huge data assets through our partnership with Maccabi. We have access to over 10 million pathology slides with the associated report. This goes back already 20 years. Coupled with this, which really makes it unique, is the full EMRs. So all the clinical data associated with these cases. So every drug that was given, every treatment, basically everything related to the patient's history. Beyond the data from Maccabi, we also partner with other institutes worldwide, and that helps us enrich our data set and not rely just on a single data set from a single source. So what we've achieved, we've brought to market a clinical grade application, AI-based solution for cancer diagnosis, which is already being used on a day-to-day basis. This is one of our customers in the US. They bought these really beautiful screens. And yeah, this is something that excites us every day. So beyond this, we've already have a significant, our initial focus was in the European market, where we have already multiple customers, significant successes with NHS in the UK, important customers in France, Germany, and other countries. My move to the US earlier this year as part of our increased focus on the US market. We already have our initial commercial footprint and some important partnerships, but working to expand that. Beyond that, we also have a few customers more far-flung places like Australia and Brazil. So where does this head? So our focus today is really on clinical practice, helping pathologists do their work better, more efficiently, and with less mistakes. But where this really leads to is really, you could think of what we're doing as adding a new modality to cancer diagnosis, a new way to look at pathology slides to extract quantitative features. And these allow, you can use this modality together with other modalities to create novel predictions and prognose disease and help really improve patient treatment. So from our strategy perspective, the way we look at it today, we're focusing mostly on the clinical AI applications. The starting point for that are the data partnerships, building the AI, using it in clinical deployments, and working with the partners within the ecosystems, the companies like Philips and Roche, with which we have strategic partnership to deliver product to market. On top of that, the other direction is more research-oriented, where we develop what we call these next-generation diagnostics, these predictive devices, predictive algorithms. Here, we work together with partners, typically academic partners or life science partners. With them together, we have some data assets, they have the data assets, we create the data pool. And within a machine learning framework, we work together to develop predictive algorithms for improving patient care. And I always like to end where I begin. All of these, again, examples of real live cases in our customer sites, where the diagnosis was revised thanks to our technology. Thank you.
Wonderful, Joseph, thank you. Our panelists, I invite you back on to ask Joseph your questions.
Hi, Joseph. Can you perhaps, and I may have missed this, so my apologies, but can you tell us a little bit more about the accuracy and performance of your algorithms, how those perform? And in the case that anything is missed, does the pathologist have the opportunity to kind of weigh in and have that final approval per se when it for a diagnosis?
Yeah. So we've published, we have several publications, including the publication in the Lancet, where we demonstrate the accuracy of the algorithms. So you see their numbers of around 0.99 AUC and very high specificity and sensitivity. But at the end, the responsibility lies with the pathologists. We don't fully automate anything. You can think of it as a pathologist assistant. We point out regions of interest that we think the pathologists should pay special attention to. We help them do some measurements, but we don't take upon ourselves to decide or make the diagnosis. I think eventually we'll get there, but that's still quite far away. I'd say more than a decade away.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Joseph, Omar here from Cedars-Sinai. I know you mentioned FDA in there, and I think I just turned my head just with enough time to miss what your comment was on that. Can you just run past that again?
Yeah, so last year we received FDA breakthrough designation.
Okay.
So basically that means that we're working closely with FDA on our first clearance, and they recognize the clinical importance of the products that we're bringing to market and the potential for having a positive impact on patient care. And the plan is to complete that clearance by the end of this year.
Nice. And I'm always curious too, how large is your company these days in terms of employees?
We're 60 people.
Joseph, is there a patient component to your strategy long-term? I mean, I know you've been focused on that from a clinical perspective and the AI for the pathologist, but as I look at your mission, is there a component of your strategy in the future where you bridge the patient provider pathology relationship?
Yeah, I think there's a few. First of all, when I think about the patient, what I really like about what we're doing is that it really is available for, it's not something which is only available for someone who's paying a lot of money for their diagnosis. It's not specialized. It's really something, actually, most of our success has been in kind of commercial labs who deal with high volumes and not these kind of top tier academic institutes. And to be honest, these are the labs that really need us because they have the most volume. They're kind of more working under extreme stress, and they need a safety net. So that kind of pleases me to know that, that we're making sure that patients who are not kind of have the opportunity to be treated at the top centers are still getting the right diagnosis. There's an interesting question whether there's opportunity in some markets to go directly to patients. Would patients be willing to pay more for having AI used on their product? I think that's not our focus today. Something else which I think is interesting for patients, if you think of pathology, when you get the pathologist diagnosis, it's really a report. There's nothing visual for the patient or even the physician to see. And this kind of technology allows them, it has some psychological importance that they can actually see their cancer, they can see it marked. It's something a bit more, I can't point out exactly why is this important, but it is important for patients somehow to have something more tangible that they can look at, that they can somehow feel.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Joseph, I love the use case for the misdiagnosis. I know at HCSC, we've been looking a lot at second opinion services too. Just curious, what's on your future roadmap? Is there like the potential to expand to different cancers beyond oncology?
Yeah. So first of all, so kind of our vision is really to become a platform which is widely applicable in pathology. So to cover all of the important use cases. So we have today, we started with prostate and breast cancer and recently deployed our gastric solution. And we intend to keep on rolling different types of cancer. And we focus mostly on cancer because obviously that's the most interesting, but there are also use cases in pathology which are important, which aren't cancerous. Let's say H. pylori and gastric, kind of Helicobacter. So we also we don't really limit ourselves only to cancer. Everything within pathology is possible to do with our technology. Of course, when we think of the more predictive elements, and they're really cancer is the key question. That's where it's key. Okay.
Last questions for Joseph?
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Joseph. And
thank you.
Panelists. Awesome. So last but not least, we have one more pitch from Alon Joff, the co-founder and CEO of Eleos Health. Alon, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Casey, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure. My name is Alon Joffe, CEO with Eleos Health. Thank you for aMoon and Matter for hosting this and kind of inviting us to present what we do. So I'll take the next few minutes to kind of tell the story of Eleos and why we're in the behavioral health space and why we're doing what we're doing. So what we do in a sentence is we digitize behavioral health conversations and we take this unstructured data and transform them into operational insights. For us, the founders, this is a very personal mission. As Air Force veterans, we all have family members, friends dealing with behavioral health conditions. For me personally, I have many friends, unfortunately, dealing with PTSD who simply did not progress for years. And that's why, if there is one thing I want you to remember about Eleos, is that we are, for the first time, quantifying the black box of behavioral health. Our background as founders is a combination of deep natural language process expertise, voice analysis, and behavioral health. And that's what's really unique about the team here at Eleos, is that combination of deep clinical and technological knowledge applied in the context of behavioral health treatment. Now, I want to ask you to imagine that this is your patient, and try and put yourself in the psychologist's shoes for a second. Every patient has a unique story, personal background, medical information, lifestyle, and treatment progress, and this is a single person. In the course of a day, you can see and listen to 9 different people, 45 minutes to 60 minutes each, and at the end of the day, feel like 3, 4, 5 different reports. In the course of a week, this is how your week will look like. 40 different members, 40 different patients, 40 different stories. We all know the huge demand COVID has brought to behavioral health services, and how behavioral health is also broken in some ways. But one major problem that we focus on is, of course, the mismatch between demand and supply. And there are even a more concrete problem that we address. So when you think about the fact that we need today in the US 4 times the number of clinicians we have, the first order of business is how can we improve the productivity and effectiveness of the clinicians we have? And what amazed us when we started Eleos was that clinician best tool is still very much only their notebook. That's where we are. And that leads to very high burnout and poor efficacy. What's unique about behavioral health, though, is when you think about it, it's the only area in healthcare where a lot of the treatment is the conversation, right? Think about it for a second. If we agree on this assumption that a big part of the treatment is the conversation, why aren't we leveraging those conversations? It's like having a pathologist not looking at their scan and not using Ibex to do that, right? So we have the data, we just don't leverage that. And looking backwards, we have digitized the medical record to store structured data and build giant companies around that. In a sense, we've also accelerated the digitization of access to care during COVID and build giant companies around that as well. So we believe the last uncharted territory is how do we digitize the unstructured data, the conversations, the clinical encounters. Imagine the impact that will have on automating clinical workflows and improving quality of care, specifically in an area like behavioral health, where the most critical data points lie in this unstructured data. And that's what we have built, a voice to insight solution that increases provider capacity while paving the path to value-based care in behavioral health. And let's understand how this works. So we run in the background of sessions, whether they are face-to-face, telehealth, and provide 3 main value propositions. Session intelligence automation. You can think about this as the equivalent of an MRI or a CT scan for that specific session. We understand really what is going on in that session from a clinical perspective, which intervention are used, what topics are discussed, are we following evidence-based practice? Second component is documentation automation. So right after the session ends, the clinician gets a baseline of their note, compliant note, in their EHR. And compliance automation, where we flag compliance risk and suggest relevant CPT codes to the compliance team. In essence, structuring this unstructured data. As you can see, the product is seamlessly embedded in the clinical workflow. So it's overlaying existing EHRs and telehealth solution. It is high trust, SOC 2, and HIPAA compliant. And that approach of weaving voice AI technology into the clinical workflow is a major driver of growth for Eleos. Today, deploy across the country with thousands of clinicians using that, reducing on average documentation time by 35 to 40%, proven over 60% IRR across 5 years, net promoter score 55, and on average 30 days from signature to go live. To summarize the key benefits for the different stakeholders, we really empower the full clinical and operational team, from the CEO to the clinician and the case manager. For clinicians, is how can we shift their attention to provide more care and less ops? For operators, how can we provide a safety net against audits and clawbacks? For clinical leaders, ensuring the delivery of evidence-based care to increase client retention and improve the quality of care that we provide to our consumers. And for supervisors, how can we unlock time-efficient supervision that is based on in-session data and not only on partial data that we see in progress notes? Lastly, that's what really differentiates Eleos, is that we have aligned the interest of all the stakeholders. With Eleos, clinician can really see more patients. They can improve their quality of life. Providers can increase their volume, but also take on risk, because for the first time, they can generate performance data. They can demonstrate the level of care that they and their clinicians provide. And for payers, is how can we coordinate care without adding additional resources and understand where should we refer our members. So that's a glimpse about Eleos Health. Thank you for joining and listening.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our panelists, I'll turn it over to you.
Alan, it's Tom. Quick question, who pays you? Is it the provider and the payer? Is that how you monetize? I mean, is it
so Eleos is a product.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Tom. So Eleos is a product to both providers and payers. Our first beachhead is with providers, although we're expanding rapidly with payers as well. The use cases are a bit different. For providers, it's mainly around the session intelligence, the documentation automation, the compliance automation. And with payers, that's the case for example, if you look at their case managers. But really is how can you coordinate care and close the gap between, for example, the conversation that are going on with the social worker on the provider front to the conversation that the case manager is doing on the payer front. How can we bridge that gap and understand really the data that is happening in all those conversations?
In the insights, are the insights real-time insights that are coming back to the provider, as well as post meeting the patient where they're documenting in their notes?
So true. It's a combination. Some of them are real time, some of them post. And when I mean post, I mean like 2 or 3 minutes after the session ends.
Got it.
Yeah.
And is the platform, do you have the flexibility to go to different size multi-specialty and primary psych practices that are small versus larger practices?
Yeah, today in terms of the go-to-market strategy, we are focusing on, I would say, mid to large size practices. So we're not supporting like, a single practitioner. But in terms of the technology, it's agnostic, right? So we can integrate with most popular EHRs, video solutions. It's just a matter of going through that 30 to 60 day implementation process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Alan, we're seeing like a huge surge in behavioral health and the need, especially in the pediatric space. Curious, I know you're kind of transferring a lot of patient data between different entities. I think I heard you were HIPAA compliant, high trust. Where's this data being stored? Is it on a cloud or a different platform?
So it may vary, depends on kind of the provider or the client that we work with, but generally speaking, the data does not leave the US. It's stored on AWS region. And, we go through very kind of detailed security IT reviews with between hundreds to thousands of questions. You probably know these Excel files better than I do. So yeah, we take compliance, security, privacy very, very seriously. In addition, we de-identify the data after a period of time. So just to make sure that there's no data leakage, and also delete the data at some points if agreed upon with the provider. Depends on the contract and kind of what's going on there. So that's kind of high level in terms of the security and compliance strategy.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect. Any more questions? All right, Casey, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And that wraps it for our program today. So thank you so much, Daniel, Joseph, and Alon for sharing your solutions and your stories with our audience today. And thank you so much to our panelists, Omar, Tom, Kaveri, Laura, for sharing your really, really valuable insights and asking probing questions. And of course, thank you to all of you, our audience, for joining us and spending part of your day with us, whether it be the morning or nighttime. And I hope everyone has a great day. If you opted into the virtual networking session, I will send the link in our chat right now, and you will also have an email with the link in your inbox right now. So please go and join us in that Zoom, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.